Let's not pretend. Angelica Pickles was a menace. She lied to babies who trusted her. She stole from kids who couldn't fight back. In the trial, she convinces Chucky he broke Tommy's lamp, runs an entire fake courtroom to pin it on someone, anyone, and the whole time she's the one who did it. And when it's over, she stands there and gloats about the best part of her whole operation. The babies can't tell on her. Adults will never hear their side. She wasn't a misunderstood sweetheart. The people who made Rugrats built her to be the villain of the playpen, on purpose, and they did their job well. Every kid who watched this show spent years wanting somebody to finally put her in her place. So no, this video is not about how Angelica was secretly good all along. She wasn't. The uncomfortable part is different. The uncomfortable part is how young she was when she figured out exactly what cruelty could get her. Because everything you just watched, the lying, the scheming, the little courtroom dictatorship, all of it comes from a child who is 3 years old. And a 3-year-old doesn't invent a strategy like that out of nowhere. Strategies get learned. Which means somewhere, in that big beautiful house with the fancy toys, this one was working. Hold the age in your head for a second, because it's not a piece of trivia. It's the entire perspective shift of this video. When you watch Rugrats as a kid, Angelica was simply the bully. Bigger than the babies, meaner than the babies, the recurring boss fight of the series. Fine. That's what the show wanted you to see, and it's accurate. Watch her as an adult and the picture changes shape. You're not looking at a villain anymore. You're looking at a preschooler running behavior that gets results. She's 3. She can barely reach the counter. And she has already worked out how to command a room, how to run a con, and how to guarantee that at any given moment, somebody is dealing with her. To be clear about the rules here, because this matters. 3 years old doesn't make the cruelty disappear. It changes the question we get to ask about it. The old question was whether Angelica was bad, and honestly, that question is boring. The show answers it in the first season. The better question, the one this video is actually about, is why being bad worked so well for her. What was it buying her that being good apparently didn't? Because think about what her schemes actually have in common. They're loud, they're theatrical, they always need witnesses. A kid who just wanted cookies would steal cookies quietly. Angelica builds productions, courtrooms, performances, elaborate lies that only pay off if somebody is watching them land. Whatever she's really after, it isn't in the cookie jar. Rugrats answered what she was after. Quietly, across a handful of episodes most people remember as filler. And the clearest answer starts on the day Angelica Pickles decided to disappear. In Runaway Angelica, she gets punished. And she does what dramatic 3-year-olds do. She runs away. But listen to what she's actually expecting from this. She's not escaping. She's staging something. In her head, the script is already written. Her parents will panic. They'll search. They'll cry. And when she finally returns, they'll appreciate her the way they should have all along. Running away isn't the rebellion here. It's a test. She has built an experiment to measure one thing. Would anyone notice if I was gone? And then the test comes back with the worst possible result. Hiding next door, she overhears her father. He isn't panicking. He sounds relaxed. He's enjoying the quiet. And Angelica, 3 years old, does the math the only way a 3-year-old can. He's happy. I'm gone. He's happy that I'm gone. Now here's the detail that turns this episode from a gag into the emotional spine of her entire character. When she runs back crying and begging him to take her back, Drew is confused. Because he didn't know she'd left. Sit with how sad that actually is. Not because her father is cruel. He isn't. The second he understands what she's afraid of, he holds her and tells her she's his princess, and that he will always love her. The love is real. That's on screen. The tragedy is smaller and stranger than neglect. Angelica designed a whole dramatic test to find out whether she'd be missed, and the test failed because nobody realized it was running. She was performing for an audience that never knew the show had started, and before you file this under a redemption arc, the episode itself slams that door. Right at the end, Tommy asks if Angelica is going to stop being bad now. Her answer is basically no. Of course it is. One hug doesn't rewrite a kid. The fear got answered for one afternoon. The habit stayed. Rugrats was honest like that, and this video is going to stay honest with it. So what exactly is the fear underneath all of this? One episode hands it over almost clinically. In Angelica's worst nightmare, she believes her mother is going to have another baby. And watch how she processes it. She doesn't worry about sharing toys. She worries in her own words, dressed up as a question about a friend, that once everyone starts fussing over the new baby, there won't be the same attention left for her. She even calls a TV advice host about it. A 3-year-old phoning a stranger on television to ask whether her parents will still have time for her. Then comes the dream that gives the episode its title. In the nightmare, her parents don't just prefer the new baby. They look at Angelica and ask who she is. She becomes the old kid. She loses her room. She gets shoved aside in her own house, forgotten by the two people whose attention she spends every waking hour trying to secure. Now the honest guardrail, because this is where lazy versions of this essay cheat. That sequence is a dream. Her parents never forgot her. Nobody replaced her. The pregnancy scare itself doesn't even pan out. So we can't say her parents did this. What we can say is sharper. When Angelica imagines losing attention, this is what her mind builds out of it. Not less dessert. Not fewer toys. Total erasure. Who are you? For a kid drowning in stuff, in dolls and juice and princess treatment, the nightmare isn't losing any of it. The nightmare is becoming invisible. Which tells you what the currency in her world actually is. It was never the toys. She has all the toys. The scarce resource in Angelica's life, the one she fights for, schemes for, and lies for, is being looked at. If you want to watch her figure out the system in real time, one episode shows the whole mechanism, start to finish. It might be the most revealing half hour in the series. In Angelica Breaks a Leg, her parents drop her at Tommy's house. And she does something we almost never see her do, she asks. Politely, more or less. She asks Stu to play. He's busy. She asks Dee Dee, busy. She tries Lou, not interested. Even Tommy falls asleep on her. And she says it straight out, no scheming, no act. Nobody wants to do anything. Nobody pays attention to me. Asking nicely just ran a clean experiment, and asking nicely lost. Then she sees a woman on television with a broken leg being weighted on hand and foot, and you can watch the idea land on her face. She fakes the injury. A medical mix-up convinces the adults the leg really is broken. And suddenly Angelica has everything she asked for an hour ago and couldn't get. A bed, a buzzer, constant service. Grown adults sprinting when she calls. She milks it so hard it stops being sympathetic almost immediately, because of course she does. She's Angelica, but look at what the episode just laid out, in order, like a proof. She asks for attention and gets nothing. She becomes a problem and gets everything. The show never says a word about psychology, and it doesn't need to. One episode makes the connection unusually hard to ignore. Somewhere in that afternoon, a lesson got confirmed that most people take decades to unlearn. If I ask, maybe. If I make it impossible to ignore me, always. Run that lesson back over every scheme you watched in the cold open. The courtroom. The lies. The tantrums that always seem to happen where adults can see them. This is the point where the easy verdict starts to wobble. She's not collecting cruelty for its own sake. She's collecting reactions. And in her experience, a reaction is the one thing that never fails to show up. Now, before this hardens into a neat little story about neglected rich kids, we have to do something Nicole never did to us. We have to attack our own theory. Because if you're paying attention, you should already have an objection loaded. Angelica is not ignored. Not by any normal definition. Drew adores her. He calls her his princess, brings her juice, caves on ice cream, spoils her past the point of parody. Charlotte loves her too, fiercely, in her own high-speed way. And in Pickles vs. Pickles, when Angelica goes too far, her parents actually hold the line and set limits. These are not checked-out people. This kid gets more resources, more treats, and honestly more raw parental energy than half the children in that show. So the neglect story is dead. Good. It deserved to die, because it was never the real story. Here's the version that survives the evidence. Being spoiled and feeling unseen are not opposites. They can live in the same house. A child can be handed a mountain of things and still not get the one resource that doesn't come in a box, which is steady, undivided attention. Drew gives her everything except limits she can rely on. Charlotte gives her love in the gaps between calls. That phone, permanently attached to her ear, Jonathan on the other end, is one of the most consistent visual jokes in the entire series. It's a gag. It's also a picture of something true. Work keeps interrupting Charlotte's presence. Not her love, her presence. Watch Educating Angelica with this lens and the pattern stops being background noise. Angelica is right there, mid-sentence, mid-moment, and the phone rings and Jonathan wins. Again, nobody in that scene is being cruel. Charlotte would take a bullet for this kid. But from 3 feet off the ground, the lesson being broadcast is simple, and it repeats across the whole series. Whatever is on the other end of that phone outranks you. A kid can't argue with a lesson like that. A kid can only adapt to it. And this isn't a fan theory reverse-engineered 30 years later. The people writing the show talked about it while they were writing it. In a 1998 New Yorker profile of the Rugrats team, the writers described wanting to dig into why Angelica was such a rotten kid, and the episodes they built kept landing in the same place. Career-focused parents, a kid performing for their attention, and neediness sitting right under the meanness. The bully was constructed with a hole in the middle, on purpose. So correct the thesis live, right here. It was never zero love. It was love arriving in the wrong currency. Things instead of time. Indulgence instead of consistency. A princess title instead of an audience. And a very smart 3-year-old who noticed the difference before she could spell any of those words, which finally answers the question this whole series quietly runs on. Out of everyone in her world, why does Angelica spend her days ruling over a playpen of 1-year-olds? The reflex answer is because they're easy targets. True, but incomplete. Watch what the babies actually give her that no one else in her life reliably does. They react. Every single time. They believe her lies. They fear her threats. They follow her orders. When Angelica walks into the playpen, she is instantly, totally, unavoidably the center of the room. Think about who else grants her that. She can't make Charlotte end a business call. She can't control whether Drew has work. Adults have schedules, and Angelica has learned that a 3-year-old doesn't get to vote on them. But Tommy has no schedule. Chucky has no meetings. The babies are the one audience in her life that can never be too busy for her, one way to read her whole reign of terror. And to be clear, this is an interpretation. The show never spells it out. Angelica doesn't really know how to create connection. Nobody modeled it consistently enough. But she is world-class at creating a reaction. And for a lonely kid, a reaction might be the closest available substitute for attention. It's attention with the warmth stripped out. It still counts on the scoreboard. It still proves somebody is looking. And if you want the purest version of this pattern, look at who Angelica actually confides in. Not the babies. Not her parents. Cynthia. A battered doll with half its hair missing, dragged into every scheme, every meltdown, every private moment the show gives her. Kids love their toys, sure. But notice the role Cynthia plays. She's not a plaything. She's a confidant. The one relationship in Angelica's life where the other party is guaranteed to stay, guaranteed to listen, and guaranteed never to pick up a phone. Her best friend is the audience she never has to fight for. Read into that exactly as much as you're comfortable with. The show put it there either way. There's a detail in Runaway Angelica that makes this reading hard to shake. She's mid-crisis, hiding, genuinely scared her family is happier without her. And what does she do with the babies who find her? She threatens them into silence and starts ordering cookies. Even at her lowest moment, the instinct fires. Lock down the room you can control, because the room you actually want is never guaranteed. So where does that leave the case against Angelica Pickles? Not dismissed. Let's be extremely clear about that, because the ending where she was secretly good all along is both false and boring. She hurt Chucky. She framed babies for things she did. She used every power gap available to a 3-year-old, and she enjoyed it. Understanding her buys her exactly zero forgiveness for any specific thing she did. The show kept her cruelty on screen for 9 seasons, and this video is keeping it on screen too. But the verdict does get amended, because we asked a better question than the one we grew up with, and it produced a better answer. Angelica wasn't born mean. What Rugrats actually shows, episode after episode, is a loved, spoiled, materially drowning little kid who is scared of one specific thing being forgotten and who ran the experiments a 3-year-old can run. Asking nicely got her an empty living room. Being a problem got her the whole house. She didn't choose cruelty because she loved cruelty. She kept choosing it because it never once failed to make somebody look. The strangest part is that her opposite lived right there in the same show. Susie Carmichael, the kid who never demanded the room and quietly learned what happens to children who don't. That's a different kind of sad, for a different day. For Angelica, go back to that boast from the trial one last time. The babies can't tell on her. As a kid, you heard a villain celebrating the perfect crime. Listen to it now. She's celebrating that her only witnesses are people who can't leave and can't be believed. That was the audience she built her whole kingdom on. Toddlers, because toddlers can't be too busy. That's not a mastermind talking, that's a 3-year-old who figured out that love in her house was guaranteed and attention wasn't. And who decided, before she was old enough to know what the decision would cost her, that she would rather be impossible to ignore than take her chances on being missed.